CEO of CrowdFlower, and Ben Narasin, a partner at Canvas Ventures, to speak about science fiction and whether or not it's a help or hindrance for the adoption of AI.
Okay, we'll jump right into it. So I'm Ben Narasin. I'm a general partner at Canvas Ventures. Before that, I was a seed investor for about 10 years, everything from lending club to Zenefits, and before that, I was an entrepreneur for 25 years, having taken one of the first e-commerce companies in the world public. We're very proud at Canvas to have CrowdFlower as part of our portfolio. I'll let Robin introduce himself.
Great, thanks Ben, and thanks to F50 for hosting the event. So my name is Robin Bordoli. I'm the CEO of CrowdFlower. Been fortunate to be at that company for a couple of years, not the founder, but have come in and helped sort of drive the acceleration of the growth within the AI industry.
And you guys had some big news yesterday, right?
We did, yes. So we just announced a new round of funding, which is great. So we can take $20 million and use that to continue the acceleration of the adoption of AI within the enterprise, which is sort of the area of the industry that we focus on as well.
So I assume most of these people know what you do, but why don't you do a high-level overview of CrowdFlower and the products you offer?
Absolutely. So we describe ourselves as a human-in-the-loop AI platform. So there's a misperception out there that AI is only about machine intelligence and removing human intelligence. The reality is you actually need human intelligence applied before the algorithm to create training data that teaches the algorithm how to work. And then you need human intelligence after the algorithm, the human in the loop, to course correct when it gets it wrong, so it can fail safely and continue to learn in the areas where it's not yet at acceptable accuracy as well. So we're a natural complement to the major algorithmic players, Amazon, Salesforce, Google, IBM, Microsoft, where we're focused on making AI work with the complements either side of the algorithm.
I was speaking at an event about the future of IoT, and they were asking me where I thought the most compelling opportunities were. And I said, well, you know, these devices, and this will tie into sort of talk a little bit around science fiction, are all throwing up this massive amount of data, but we have to figure out how to get value out of it. And I was pretty much parroting Rebecca Lynn, the partner on the board of CrowdFlower's view of how AI, particularly with human in the loop, can be made better. And that is that if you invest $1 million in your algorithm, you can get this much improvement. But if you invest $1 million in cleansing the data you give to that engine, you can have an improvement of that sort. Is that sort of a fair?
That's fair, and we can't take credit necessarily for that idea, but we can certainly take credit for sort of productizing it. So Peter Norvig, that many of you will know from Google, sort of first sort of characterized this concept. A bad model with great data is better than a great model with bad data.
So let's talk a little bit about science fiction, the topic we were assigned. Do you think it's beneficial, neutral, or does it hinder you in having so many sort of general AI? I always think of these days everybody wants to be Tony Stark with an Iron Man mask and somebody, Jarvis, speaking in their ear and responding to everything, or in the old days it was the benevolent version of HAL from 2001. How do you think the perceptions that are out there in the world make your job easier or harder?
Yeah, it's a very complex topic. So I think in many regards, the plethora of science fiction sort of AI stories actually help the adoption of AI within the enterprise or within society at large. And in many cases, they hinder as well. So let me be sort of specific in a couple of cases. I think at the general level, the fact that science fiction has sort of been at the vanguard of how we conceptualize AI is important, because until you can imagine it, you can't do it. So it's inspired a whole generation of researchers, scientists, engineers to sort of work out what's possible. I think some specific examples like Asimov's sort of 3 laws of robots, start to explore the idea of, well, how should humans, what should the relationship be between humans and non-human beings? So there are specific examples that are helpful. I think if you sort of fast forward to maybe in the last 6 months, I think it's switched to being unhelpful, to being a hindrance. So the story, if you look at like Ex Machina, does everyone remember Ex Machina? So Alicia Vikander playing the sort of the non-human being that outsmarts a human creator and kills him and sort of escapes.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Sorry. And sort of Skynet, obviously with Terminator, this idea that we're inherently in conflict. And actually one of my professors from alma mater, Stephen Hawking, at Cambridge, was sort of sensationalized as well in the press. It's the end of mankind. I don't think those are helpful because they, instill fear without sort of understanding what the balanced approach is. I think the other big area where, if you look at, you talked about how, I remember, any Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fans in the audience? A few. So you may remember Marvin, he was like a manic depressive robot, and the reason he was depressive was he had such unbelievable cognitive intelligence, brain power, and he was only given like stupid tasks to do that he was depressed at his purpose in life. But this idea that AI is about the algorithm, it's about this huge brain, and that's what's going to solve everything, and sort of a general purpose AI, I think actually has become a hindrance in the last 6 months, because that plus the mainstream media coverage is setting unrealistic expectations and a misunderstanding about how to start, the art of the start. How do I start to think about applying AI to my business?
And it is interesting, I was at an AI conference about a year ago, and everybody was talking about the journey to GAI, general AI, the all-encompassing, all-thinking. I just feel like we're in kindergarten compared to that. You can teach systems to do a certain amount of things, and obviously those are improving. But yeah, there's been people that have come out on the other side of AI. I think Bill Gates and a couple other people funded this effort to make sure it was used for good. I am fascinated by, I think the reason the topic is what it is, I wrote a story for TechCrunch on the importance of science fiction to entrepreneurs, because if you look at many of the things that have been achieved, they've all been predicted. There's almost nothing I can think of that hasn't, whether it was Neil Stephenson with Snow Crash or something else. But I wrote a fascinating piece, since there's somewhat of an international audience here. Neil Gaiman, who wrote a series of graphic novels called Sandman, very well thought of sort of science fiction fantasy author, was invited to the first science fiction convention in China. And he was asking some of the people of substance there that came from the government why they were doing this. And they said, we came to Silicon Valley. Well, at first they said, we are tired of being the people that make your things. We want to be the ones that invent the thing. Which I thought was interesting. This was a while back. And he said, secondly, we came to Silicon Valley and we visited all the companies that you love, the Googles and the Facebooks. But we didn't talk to the people that ran them, we talked to the people in the booths. We talked to the people in the cubes. And they all read science fiction when they were young. And we believe that's important, and we want to bring that here because it doesn't exist. So we are influenced by some particular writer. Has Stevenson influenced me?
Douglas Adams, the Hitchhiker's Guide, he was, I had the pleasure of seeing him lecture as well, so sort of know all the canon and love that. That was very inspirational to me, even with the sort of sardonic humor.
I just want to babble because
yeah, if you grab a Babelfish, the universal translator, we're almost there. Babelfish, Marvin, Zaphod Beeblebox, the idea that Earth is a huge computer to come up with the answer to the life, and someone forgot to ask what the right question was. Very inspirational at a high level, but I think this idea that AI is about the brain, is about the algorithm, has become sort of pernicious, and it's just flat out wrong. You used the analogy of sort of a child. If you think about the algorithm is a blank slate. In many regards, if you think about applying AI to a business process, it might be something very mundane. It might be something as simple as you want to categorize support tickets, so the customers of your customers are writing a complaint or an issue, giving you feedback. You're getting that. You've got a text-based conversation back and forth, describing some issues that's important to your customer. If you could actually have an AI process that actually correctly categorizes that, understands the topic, understands the level of importance, and eventually what the appropriate response is, that doesn't sound glamorous, but it's incredibly valuable to a business. The problem is, if you start just with the algorithm, an algorithm in that regard is like a 4 or 5-year-old going to kindergarten. You would not unleash a 4 or 5-year-old at kindergarten onto reading your support ticket, sort of responding appropriately. And so the question is, how do you get that 4 or 5-year-old to being a performant adult, to use that analogy? And you need two things. You need the lesson plan. How do you go teach teach that child? And that's training data, taking real data from the world, text-based, image-based, and structuring it so it can learn. So in the autonomous vehicle example, it's taking tens of millions of images at street level, so the algorithm can start to identify what's a pedestrian, what's a bike, what's a parked car, what's a moving car, what's a bridge across the road. And then the second part is after the algorithm, the human in the loop. Absolutely critical. Think of this as the teacher giving the test, working out where does the student fail, and then focusing the learning on the areas that you failed, which then becomes new training data. So I think we're at the beginning of huge adoption, but I spent a lot of my time sort of dispelling the myths that science fiction is sort of embedded inside of executives' mind. Yeah.
So before we say goodbye and thanks for all the fish, why don't we take a couple of questions? Sure.
So you talked about very much labeled data, supervised learning, right? So where do you think is the next step? Is there a semi-supervised, maybe automated in the process? Where do you think you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that it's important for non-technical folks to understand is an inherent difference between humans and machines. Humans are lousy at self-assessing performance. If someone asked me yesterday to predict, whether the Warriors were going to win, I'd give a prediction, but I wouldn't be able to say I'll give a prediction and I'm 54% confident. Humans, by nature, if they give a prediction, they feel they have to be confident. Machines don't have that. They can give a prediction and say I'm 37% confident. So starting to understand what is the appropriate confidence level that starts to automate that. So above it, I accept the output from the machine, from the algorithm, and below it, I route it back for humans, to check it or apply their intelligence to that. So I think that's really where the adoption is going to happen, is sort of that automation based on the confidence threshold. So the output is a blended output. It's a blended output of humans and machines. It's not suddenly we flick a switch and it replaces all humans. So
just a quick follow-up. So how does it scale? Machines, automation, humans. We just heard from other speakers also. There's a variety of data, right? Depending on the industry.
yeah.
How do you think it will scale the human aspect of it, the human intervention aspect?
Yeah, so I mean that's the business that we've built. So we've built a technology platform, but it's not about sourcing humans. There's lots of human intelligence. It's about the structured application of it. And so, that's the business that we've built. Happy to follow up afterwards, but it's a longer conversation.
We have two more questions to wrap it up. If there are some, I see one behind the pole. Yep.
So we heard about one-shot learning earlier today in one of the sessions. I would be curious to it seems like in your business, one-shot learning can have a lot of sort of applicability. Just curious if you guys thought of that and if it's relevant to what you guys do.
If I understand the question, so where we're focused on is helping enterprises apply AI to their business, which is different than someone trying to build some big consumer service that is applicable across tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people. What we learn time and again is the specifics of the data that enterprise needs is specific to them. So there are some abstracted learnings that you can learn sort of across customers, like what's best practice in autonomous vehicles, the way in which you do bounding boxes, the way in which you do semantic segmentation. But one of the reasons why the big companies aren't going to rule the roost and dominate AI within the enterprise is the enterprises own the data, have this data themselves. And so that's what sort of makes the opportunity possible for us. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
All right, any last questions right here, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, so when you sell your product to enterprise, like your product is quite unique, it's not analytics or the data science product. So the decision maker, in your customer company is head of data science, or head of marketing, or CIO. Like in percentage, what decision makers who buying your product?
It's a great question. We predominantly sell into data science and machine learning teams because they're the ones with the problem, which is a lack of training data is sort of, where the we're the aspirin, not the vitamin in that regard. Where that team resides can vary across, because of where we are in the evolution of sort of AI and machine learning. Those teams can sometimes be centralized, underneath a chief data scientist or a chief scientist. Sometimes they're embedded within product groups or operations groups. It sort of depends on the use case, and it depends on sort of the industry. But first and foremost, we're selling into the data science and the machine learning team.
Thank you, Rob, for taking the time out. Thank you guys for having us.
Great.